I know that there are a lot of people who want me to address all of the stuff, respond to a lot of the stuff that's come out. I am not really willing to. For anyone who's interested in any of the statements that I've made, it's all on Twitter, so if you want to go and check out my Twitter, there are a couple of people who have said, oh, you should make viral videos like these people have on you. And I know that that's what they want, because it drives the views. Drama drives views. Like, as someone who's a pretty dramatic person, I know that, so I'm not going to do that. I don't feel that it's necessary for me to respond to someone who used my family trauma against me, B, someone who lied on me several times in their video and then demanded that I explain to them what my problem is. I don't feel the need to respond to people who use people's suicide against them or their suicidal ideation against them. I don't feel the need to answer to people who call other people stupid for having questions. So I am not gonna address it. I did what I thought was what I needed to do. I put all my cards on the table and walked away. I'm not playing this game anymore. I don't think it's worth playing this game anymore. I don't want to be a part of a community where quite literally everyone has shit on everyone. And nobody ever wants to confront it, nobody ever wants to talk about it, nobody ever wants to deal with the fact that there are problems in this community, and I just don't want to contribute to it anymore. I have privated, or unlisted rather, a bunch of my videos that I had made before because I feel like they no longer represent me. I feel like they promote the wrong types of people, and I don't want to do that anymore. I have completely separated from that movement. Don't care what they do from now on. I'm not really looking for a community, and from day one, I did not come here to play games. From day one, I said that if you say dumb shit, I'm gonna talk about it, especially if it affects loads and loads and loads of people. Even if it affects one other person, I'm gonna say something about it, because you're doing dumb shit. I don't care who you are to me. If you're doing dumb shit and you're a public figure and you have power in the sense that you are a public figure, then I'm gonna talk about it. That's just the case. And the simple way of preventing that was simply not to tell me that y'all are doing dumb shit. But you did tell me, so there you go. I want to reiterate that I was not the first person to leak the information. The information was already out by a third party, and I only did it once the heat started coming down on me. And I threw down all my cards, I flipped the table, and I stopped playing this game. I'm not part of this game anymore, and frankly, I don't want to be. Anyway, today we are going to be doing a dramatic reading. I know I usually do these in live streams, but I'm not quite as comfortable as I thought I would be doing live streams, especially since my tech seems to be failing on that front. So we will be doing a dramatic reading. It's not going to be live. It's probably going to premiere, but it's not going to be live. I'm not going to be able to take your questions or any queries. It's just going to be a dramatic reading. Before I start playing that section of the video, what I do want to say is, if you like this video, if you like me, you support me, remember to like, share, and subscribe. I am going to try and keep my uploads to one time a week, absolute bare minimum. I do want to return to my old lockdown routine, which was throw a bunch of makeup on my face, record a video, nonsense or otherwise, edit it and upload it every single day. That's what I do want to return to, but right now I don't feel like I'm at the right capacity to do that. So I will be doing that hopefully in future, maybe by the time we're in February, I don't know. Also, your girl's birthday is coming up soon, so if you feel like buying me something for my birthday, all of the links are in the description below. Obviously, you do not have to, there is no obligation to, but I know that there are some people out there who like doing nice things for me, so if you would like to do that, feel free to. It's there. I also want to give an update on Turtle. I would gladly bring him here and show him to you guys, but he's currently running the marathon on his wheel and I really don't want to disturb him. But he is a sweet boy and I love him, and I am incredibly proud with the amount of trust that he puts in me, given that I've only had him for a few weeks now. And every single like taming your hamster tutorial has said like sometimes it can take months to allow, like, for your hamster to allow you to hold them. But he's gotten quite comfortable with me and I've gotten quite comfortable with him, and honestly I never thought that missing out on sleep could be such an enjoyable experience with me just hanging out with my hamster. So I'm glad that I have him. And I also want to briefly thank everyone who is just being real with me, not necessarily supporting me, but being real with me, giving me their honest opinions. I do appreciate that. I do feel like I'm entitled to my own, and I do feel like I can read and comprehend things on my own, and I don't need, somebody else to call me an idiot to understand something. So I appreciate all of you. I may be a little quiet at the moment because I just don't feel incredibly social after several people have just been horrible to me. Anyways, let's get into the video. We're going to be reading a story called Maverick, and it was a story that I wrote when I was about 16. I love this story. It's something that's very, very close to my heart. However, I doubt that it will ever be a shelved story because it was a pure escapism piece. And when we get into the backstory of the main character, you'll kind of understand that. I've intentionally made her Bangladeshi. I've intentionally given her a backstory that's very similar to mine. And it is just an escapism piece for me. And that's why I feel like it's probably never shelf worthy. It's probably not an amazing piece of work, but to me, I finally feel comfortable sitting down and presenting it for everybody. And I'm going to have I'm going to screen record the words so that you can read along with me. So yeah, enjoy the video. I hope you have a good time, a good day, good week. Keep strong in these trying times, and we'll all make it through this together, one way or another. The human will to survive is always incredibly strong, and it never fails to surprise me or anyone else. So yeah, let's get on to the video. Hi! This is take 2, by the way, for those of you who may not know. For some reason the first recording just didn't work, so I'm trying something else, and I'll see if this works. Alright. Extract from the journal of Marika Desan Omar. Journal. Tell us about the day that changed your life. This is what the lads requested of me by the fire tonight. The quietude of this new campaign is longer than I expected. The lads are getting sick of waiting, and they've much time to idle. Today was spent mostly on hunting and gathering, then cooking. Khader, as you know, has said for a while now that we should buy a place to stay, but I did not have wealth enough to buy a decent enough barracks or fortress on my own. I could ask the lads, of course, and some of them would gladly donate, but this should be my burden. It's nice to back our actions with ethical and noble intent, and I would like to say that it should be my burden alone because these boys have suffered enough for one life, that they should keep their money for themselves, and that I should be solely responsible for their upkeep. But there is no lying to you, Journal. No. I like having things within my grasp. If I buy a fortress in partnership, I risk someone challenging me. It has not happened before, and I don't see it happening in the near future, but I cannot risk collapsing what I have struggled to build up. There is no use in taking such a risk of betrayal, so I will not take it. I have spent little, refused what I could from the excess that the lads have offered me, and saved up for the fortress that has caught my eye. We're currently camped 20 miles south of it, actually, the fortress at Masyaf in the middle of the anarchy of Jordo-Syria. Word has it that the British have occupied it, busy rooting out the remains of a brotherhood that had thrived there. I seek to buy it from the British. It intrigues me, this brotherhood. But this is not the purpose for which I write upon your pages tonight. The request at the very top. A fine request, no? The lads were sharing stories of their past, but I hadn't anticipated such a question would be passed to me. Naturally, I told them that the day that changed my life was the day that I joined the British Army. Naturally, I lied. A book cannot look at me with disdain, and that is why I find comfort in you, journal. The lads wanted something thrilling, something awe-inspiring and such, or at least that is what I believe they wanted. The day that changed my life was something entirely the opposite. It was a dreary day, I believe, but such weather was common in East London where I lived. I was washing the clothes of my household in a lake. It had become my custom to also wash the clothes of the sailors that lived in and around the area and collect money from them for this chore. It was a different time, then, such a different time. That version of me would look at this version and wonder what in God's name went wrong. I remember wearing dresses and shawls, my toils bound usually to the house, my work solely with the other women in the factory. And what of me now, journal? Is that old version within me dead? The real question is, who killed her first? For as I was washing the clothes, one of the sailors came up and sat by me. He was an old fellow to look at, much older than Callum, with many creases drawn into his forehead, around his mouth and tipping his eyes. But there wasn't a thread of white in his blonde hair. He didn't stoop, he was not short, and he spoke with no stammer. It was when he handed me an all too common red coat and white stockings that I realized that he was no plain sailor. "You're one of the king's men, sir," I said with brows raised. He looked amused by my surprise. "Did you think otherwise, dear?" "I thought you were a fisherman or a bargeman, but—" I stammered, holding the coat between my hands. "But you're a soldier? A marine?" "Aye," he said, scoffing slightly. "And today might be the last I see you, lass." "Are we at war, sir?" "Aye, the French have started up against our good King Stephen again, so it's back to the waters for us." He leaned forward and sighed. "It's a pity. War never seemed far off, no matter how many times anyone wins." Not knowing what to say, I blushed and continued washing the clothes. "Come now, there's no need to shy away, lass," the man remarked. "I'm the same man I was 5 minutes ago." "I know, sir, I paused. What could a girl of my simplicity speak about with a man like you? You've served your king and your country, lived life as if it were for giving away, and you don't trumpet your achievements, even though they deserve trumpeting. I could not claim the same." "And where is it you've come from, eh? Wonderland?" He chuckled. "Do not, lass, give me credit for things I've done rarely for others and mostly for myself." What do you mean, sir? I would give up king and country to live a life like yours." That was what he said. I remember almost stumbling back and falling into the lake. How could this man say such a thing? How could he want to be anything like I was? But why?" I asked. "Tell me, lass, after you finish here, what will you go home to?" he asked in response. "Well, I'll return to my family. I'll feed my brothers and my sisters. I will humour my father a while before I put my siblings to sleep, pray, and then fall asleep myself." "And what will the next night be?" "The same, sir." "And how will you live the rest of your life?" I remember turning away to grimace, so desperate to tell him my current circumstance, yet unable, out of shame and perhaps some empty sense of family pride. "I will marry the man my father chooses for me. I will have his children and raise them as best I can. They will grow old, and so will I. And then I paused before saying, "Then, sir, I will die." "And how will you die, lass?" I frowned. "Unknown, unexceptional, and easily forgotten." The man sighed deeply. "Your life is so simple, dear. You say these things about yourself with a wavering voice and a sad face, but simplicity has its bliss. You have a family to go to, a place to call home, a plan to live by." "And these are good things?" I asked, almost angrily. He raised a brow in surprise. "I have none of these things." "None of them?" He nodded once. "None of them." But I sat up and looked at him. "It's because of people like you that people like me can exist, sir. Your work is noble and so full of new lands and adventure and—" I paused, searching for the words. "It might be that you will be remembered for what you do, forever." "When I am dead and gone, girl, perhaps burning in the deepest pits, in hell's fire, what care will I have if people remember me or not?" he snapped. I raised a brow. I had no response to that. "What they tell you, lass," he continued, "is almost never what things really are. You are lucky that the toughest decision in your life will be which kind of ribbon to put in your hair, and I don't say that in mockery. Be grateful for what you have now, because the alternative isn't as shiny and as polished as they make it seem." I huffed. At the time, I really wasn't the type for arguing, so I just inclined my head and said, "The grass is always greener on the other side, sir." "No, lass," he said, "the grass is never green enough." I resumed washing the clothes. After that, but the sailor sat by and watched in silence. I didn't think too much on what he had said, but it had shaken me, not so much in shock perhaps, but something changed when he said all those things. He lived without a home and a family and a plan, everything that had threatened to drive me insane. I doubted his words. I didn't believe him. "Who's this lad that your father's leaving you to, then?" was the next thing he asked me. But I had no intent of sharing such information in detail with this man, so I just said, "I'm not entirely sure who he is, sir." I wrung the red coat, watching the dye seep into the water of the lake, such a proud red. "Have you seen him?" "I have." "And did you like him?" I lied through my teeth. I don't know how I feel about him, sir. You know, the lads who give you these clothes have wagered that they'd all be the first to bed you." I stared at him, aghast. "What?" He kissed me. To this day, I don't know what had driven him to it or how I allowed myself to succumb to him, but it had happened when our lips parted. He said to me, and I imagine that I was blushing, "That should spare you from them," he said. "Now, if you're done with my uniform, dear." He put out his hand. I slapped the uniform into his hands and hurriedly picked up my basket of washed clothes and went away. When I asked Callum about him, he said he didn't know the man, but he knew about the wager. No one won it, Callum had said. Was this man a spirit? A spirit that possessed me long enough to drag me into this violent life? I'll never know, I guess. But I do know that what he said, and possibly what he had done, had changed me, and there was no turning back on it. Part 1. Masyaf, the Anarchy of Jordo, Syria. Chapter 1. So many memories. The sun blazed into the horizon, sinking deeper and deeper and casting the sky in a red hue. The Syrian heat made the air and sand shimmer as rows of military men marched up steadily into the looming fortress ahead. But as they moved, they could feel the cold of the Arabian night creep in. The domestic camels and sheep belonging to nomads looked up lazily, chewing loudly and slowly on the scarce shrubs that dotted the intimidating sand of sea. They grunted and turned back to their fodder at the steady marching, knowing that their shepherds would come to round them up soon, without a care or interest as to why the soldiers were here or what they wanted. How she envied them. Her name was Marika de San Omar, or at least that's what she called herself. The name might not have meant much to someone of this realm, but she was quite an icon in her own. Marika was a thin woman, with a very average look to her. She was probably Indian in ethnicity, but her manner of speech and process of action was undoubtedly British, at times perhaps far too British than she would have liked. Her hair and eyes were exceedingly black, and though it is said that her skin was once fair, it now glowed with the tan she had accumulated over years of travel. All of this may be irrelevant when it comes to light that Marika was the very best at what she did, and what she did caused both disgust and envy in her rivals and commissioners. Marika was a mercenary. She was no common cutthroat, no, over the years she had studied and trained into becoming an ideal soldier. Once she had succeeded in this, she had taken it upon herself to find others of a like mind or little choice, and forge them into ideal soldiers also. With a little help and a bit of fortune, here she was, standing at the foot of her prize, the fortress of Masyaf. Bloody British bastards, she grumbled under her breath. Khadir ibn Haytham al-Asadi, Marika's brother-in-arms and lieutenant, chuckled but didn't comment on her remark. Marika raised her hand, halting the 150-man army, and ordered them to set up camp. They slung off their packs and started erecting tents, chatting and whistling as they did so. Marika set up her own tent then, and then, having put everything in order, she put her hands on her hips and looked up at the fortress, sighing. Having second thoughts, asked Khadir, coming up beside her. There had been a phase where Khadir refused to speak English and insisted on speaking Arabic at all times. It wasn't a trouble for Marika, as she had become fluent in both, but it proved difficult to speak to the other men in the army, seeing as they came from all over the globe. Even Khadir had to accept that English was one of the easiest languages to learn and converse in, but after making the compromise to speak the simpler tongue, he spoke it with a heavy, guttural Arab accent, often mispronouncing his B's and P's. "No," Marika replied to his query, "I've worked too hard to just let it all go. Just my luck that the redcoats are strutting about in there, isn't it?" She sighed and looked up at Khadir. He was a tall, heavy-set man with a face resembling a lion's, whose skin was a matted tan, and though his beard was well kept, his dark hair had been cropped down on the account that it was impossible to tame. "I'm going to seek an audience," Marika said, throwing off the belt that held her sword and putting it away in her bag. "Want to come with?" "You're going to go unarmed?" Khadir scoffed. Marika shrugged. "They're going to ask me to put down my weapons anyway." She stripped off some of her armor and smoothed the creases out of her greying tunic so that it flowed around her thighs. She tied a red sash around her waist and fastened a belt over it. She then picked up a sheathed dagger from the pile of her weapons and stuck it in the waistband of her dark breeches, hidden from plain sight. "And I suppose you want to put up some face powder." This doesn't make sense. "And I suppose you want to put on some face powder and a pretty dress?" Khadir snorted. "That won't be necessary, no," Marika laughed, untying and retying her short hair into a ponytail, and then offered, "But I have a pretty dress for you, if you want to wear it. We've gone over this, Marika." Khadir rolled his eyes, playing along with the banter that he'd grown used to. "Your size is far too small for me." Marika blew a raspberry. "And who said it was my dress? I had one made specially for you." She looked back to the fortress. "Are you going to come or not? If you are, you'll need to put away your own weapons, Khadir." "I think it would be better to wait until the morning. We would be more presentable." "What? After they've decided to kill us?" Khadir paused. "Fair point." He started to disarm himself. "I'll come with you. Best find 2 or 3 to join us." Marika nodded and took up her empty water skin and went back to the nearest well. 2 of her mercenaries were standing there, gossiping about their women back home. "Evening, gents," she said, nodding to them. "The water fresh?" They both nodded. "The water seems undisturbed, ma'am." "They weren't expecting us, so it's not likely that they've done anything to it," one of them said, and held up a full bucket. "But you're the first here, so—" Marika put forward her skin, and the soldier poured water into it. "It's all right, man. Somebody's got to test it, right?" She drank and swirled the cool liquid about in her mouth, a bit on the grainy side, but otherwise quite refreshing. So cold. She smiled, drinking more and asking for a refill. She cupped her hands and dipped them into the bucket, taking water to rub over her face and neck. Marika sighed contentedly. The second soldier smiled. "What now, ma'am?" "We will watch the camp for the night." "Will we watch the camp for the night, or do you have something else in mind?" Marika sat down in the sand, the hue of the grains changing as the night pulled in. "I was hoping to get an audience with whichever sorry bastard had occupied my fortress, and Harder has agreed to accompany me, but I'd be more secure with a larger escort." "Do you mean to have us storm in?" the second soldier asked, "because we would love that." "You boys," Marika tutted, "always looking for trouble." She shook her head and said, "Would you two accompany me?" They looked at each other, then nodded. "Good. Disarm yourselves and come by my tent. We'll make off together." They made ready, Marika having redressed in her fitted leather armor, and approached the red-liveried guards standing at the entrance of the fortress. They wore trademark red coats and white stockings over dark breeches, and black trinicorns. Black tricorns sat on their head. Both had broadswords hanging on their belts and bayonets strapped to their backs. They hid their scarfs and jeers as Marika and the others arrived. "I seek an audience with the commanding general here," she said. The guards looked at each other, unable to disguise their amusement, and the larger of the two said, "Who are you?" Marika regarded him for a moment before she said, "Marika de San Omar." "That's supposed to mean something?" asked the other guard. "Let us through." Marika sighed. "We've disarmed ourselves, and I have business to discuss with whoever leads here." "Command is busy," said the first guard, folding his arms. "I told you we should have stormed in," one of the mercenaries murmured. Marika smiled a little at his quip, but said firmly, "You don't know me, but I'll mean something to your commander. I ought to. I believe I have may fought more of his wars than he or I may care to express." "You?" snorted the second guard. "Fought wars? What exactly are you trying to sell here, eh? You ever even seen the end of a musket, lass?" "Is that a challenge?" Marika asked them. The guards just laughed. Marika's patience thinned, and she stabbed her knee into the first guard's stomach, tore the bayonet from his back, and cracked the barrel into his chin. She cocked the gun at the other guard before he could pull his own weapon out, while the first rolled around on the floor. "I don't understand, men," she said, her tone almost casual. "It's like you're all determined to make a bitch out of me. I can be nice. I'm very good at it, actually. But for some idiotic reason, that doesn't sit well with any of you," she sighed. "Let us through. Send an armed escort with us, if you like, but let us through." The second guard hesitated, but said, "Else what?" Marika laughed. "Else I'll have to tear shit up." "What seems to be the trouble?" Marika lowered the musket and smiled at the sound of a voice she recognized. She dropped the gun and looked past the remaining guard. Captain Reynold Evans, as I live and breathe," she said, inclining her head. "It's been a while." Reynold returned the smile. He was very British in every sense of the term. The desert had granted him no tan, and the sun refused to bleach a single dark hair on his head, and even in the searing heat his red coat was buttoned up to the collar, yet there wasn't a bead of sweat on his skin. And if you stood close enough to the tall, guarded man, you would smell tea or tobacco on his breath. "Private Canom," said Reynold, pushing past the soldier. He took off his dark hat and put out a hand. "It has indeed. It does not explain or excuse the harassment of my soldiers, however." Marika stepped forward and shook his hand. "It's Marika now, actually. Marika de San Omar." "So I've heard. A general, no less. You've stepped up quite a few rungs, I must say," Reynold chuckled. "Now tell me why it is you're here." "You aren't in charge of these men, are you?" Reynold gestured for her and her companions to follow. "I'm afraid not," he said with a sigh. "You might have risen up in the world, but I am still merely a captain. A pity." Would have been easier to negotiate things with you. Who leads here? I need to speak with him concerning the fortress. Up until your occupation of it, I had intended to purchase it. Reynold paused by a door. He's a man you will be none too pleased to see. Nigel Shankar is the man in charge. Marika snorted as if Reynold was cracking a joke. When Reynold didn't reveal as much, she scowled in disdain. You're kidding. Sergeant Yellow-Bellied Pansy is now General Yellow-Bellied Pansy. She spat. And you're still a captain. How does that work? In the same way you've risen, I suppose. Except I'm exceptionally talented, Evans, Marika said. The only thing Nigel Shankar has talent for is irritating me. Nonetheless, Reynold said, he leads, which means you must speak with him. He knocked on the door and stood to a side. It was really nice seeing you again. Marika nodded as a guard opened the door and she entered the chamber with Khader and her companions. They walked up a corridor with bare sand-coloured walls, dim candles set in the floor lighting their path. Who was that? Khader asked, perhaps more aggressively than he meant to. You don't need to be jealous, Khader, Marika said. He was just someone I knew back when I was with the Regulus, commander of my cohort. Actually, he recruited me. So, a friend, nothing more. Marika gave him an amused look. Having only one sister, it was typical for Khader to be the way he was, jealous about any man who sought to even mildly flirt with Marika. It was irritating at times. Marika was more than capable of handling herself, but she appreciated the sentiment. It was nice to have someone who cared. You have nothing to worry about, she reassured. They approached a heavy, intricately carved door, and Marika didn't waste time on knocking. She opened it and let herself in. She let herself and her escort in. General Nigel Shankar looked up from his maps on the desk. His eyes narrowed and mouth bent in disdain at an instant. He was a broad man, but this only proved to make him appear shorter than he was. He was dark-haired and tanned, but his face held so much arrogance and pomp his otherwise handsome features were eclipsed by it. The two soldiers in red livery that stood behind him, his personal guard, became alert at the sudden entry. General Shankar, Marika said, spreading her arms in mock theatrics and stepping forward. Shankar stood up, leaned forward, his guards relaxing as he did so, placing both of his hands on his desk. He looked at Marika in the eye, perhaps in the hope of being intimidating, and said, "Do I know you?" "Not very well," Marika replied, folding her arms, "but I'm not here to make acquaintances." "Then why are you here?" Marika narrowed her eyes. "I set out from my home in Lower Syria to purchase this land, this fortress. I'm not happy to see you peacocks strutting about like you own the place. Where's the man who owns Masyaf? I have a price to settle with him." Shankar chuckled. "I'm sorry, Miss Desan Omar." Shankar ignored her. "I'm afraid you just missed the merchant. That man outlived his usefulness this afternoon. This fortress is property of King Stephen II of Britain, and if you have any care for your life and your purpose, you'll leave it to him." Marika stepped closer to Shankar. "Now you listen to me, lout. I've worked 18 contracts across Europe and Asia just to fill the chest for this fortress. I'm not about to just leave this to you, or Stephen, or some other frilled Nancy. I've come to buy a fortress, and I intend to buy it." Shankar's face became angry and offended, but he said, "Contracts, did you say? You wouldn't happen to be that mercenary everyone is bothering about? If you mean the mercenary that has had the British beast licking its wounds with its tail between its legs more than once, then I'm afraid I am that mercenary." Shankar took a sharp breath. "And that said, why do you think I would barter with you?" "Presumably because I'm not giving you a choice." It was Marika's turn to lean forward on Shankar's desk. "If you don't sell her, General, I will take Masyaf from you." Shankar paused. "Is that a threat?" Marika smiled. "If you were a resourceful man, you would have seen the threat as soon as it walked in." Shankar took a step back and paced about behind the desk, a finger tapping his chin as he considered his options. "Very well. This can be settled cordially, I believe," he said, looking back at Marika with his arms crossed. I'm sure a woman of your resourcefulness can meet my price, he grinned. 1 million in British pounds for this fortress, or, the grin turned into a smirk, 1 night with me. Marika raised a hand when she heard Khadir step forward. She paused a moment, looking at Shankar, waiting to hear if he had more to say. When he didn't continue, she instructed, "Put it in writing for me." Shankar raised a brow, but did as he was told on a scrap of paper. Marika picked up a lit candle and poured candle wax in one corner of the page and said, "Seal it." Shankar took out the ring bearing the king's seal and, with an indignant look on his face, marked the candle wax with it. Marika took up the drink on his desk and spat in it. She drank from the tankard and set it down before saying, "I will return with the money required to liberate my fortress of you. Enjoy your stay here while you can, General. You won't be staying long." She straightened, taking up the sealed page. "Good day."